It's been an ordeal. Hey, welcome to the Hoff Time Report. I'm your host, Wayne Hoffman, and I'm here. Oh, by the way, in case you wondered, pronouns he and him. No, just kidding. We don't. We
Good.
don't. Just because it's fun. Welcome, Representative Barb Ehardt is here from Idaho Falls. She
I made it.
practically felt like she walked from Idaho Falls because she was downtown. And
I'm directionally impaired.
it's
I freely
okay.
admit it.
We're so glad to have you here, and welcome to the program. How are
Thank
things
you.
going?
I guess we're wrapping up.
You had quite a day today. For those of you who are paying attention in the Capitol this afternoon on the Commission for Libraries, but talk about that because that was a really interesting vote. For summary, the House representatives voted down the budget for the Commission for Libraries. Take it away from there.
I think this is, for some of us, a cumulative vote. As you well know, twice in the last 4 years, I brought my sexuality opt-in bill. I've actually worked on this very issue with a friend of mine from Idaho Falls who is probably one of the nation's leading authorities on sex and sexuality in school and in the libraries. And we actually tried to get it out of the libraries before. So even though this centered on budget, there's policy attached to it. And, when the libraries came to testify in state affairs, they were wrong and they were unapologetic in their stance for being able to keep graphic materials that are inappropriate for children. I would maintain they're inappropriate for any of us, let alone children. And this vote, I think, as much as anything, if you listen to the comments on the floor, it was about that.
They were so for background, because you have to unravel a lot of things. So there was a bill, it's House Bill 666, that would have basically taken away the immunity that libraries get to dispense obscene materials to young people, underage people. And the bill passed the House overwhelmingly. It's sitting over there in the Senate, not doing anything because apparently the Republican caucus doesn't want to hear a bill that would prevent young people from having exposure to obscene materials. Okay, there's that. So then you have this other thing, the budget for the Commission on Libraries. And Wendy Horman, the bill sponsor, tried to say, look, we've got this language in here that says basically, how is it worded? Go and sniff out if you're complying with the statutes in existence for obscene materials. And that was supposed to placate the concerns, I guess, about what was already going on, facilitated through the commission. The commission's not a library, but it now has a library collection, I guess, if you will, an e-collection of books.
Right, they do. And again, in the past, it's actually Representative Horman with whom I've worked, and we have met with some of those associated with the library, and in regards to some of the online stuff too, the Lilly and EBSCO, and we're not getting the results we want. Someone has to be held accountable. You cannot hold accountable, the school library in Twin Falls or Idaho Falls. I mean, this is an overarching board. I recognize that Representative Horman had met, and there's a new commissioner. She feels encouraged by that, but I mean, this literally is coming down to we people and the agencies and entities that really should be reporting to us need to understand and receive direction. We don't want this. And I mean, to me, even if it was a close vote, it was a very strong directive, especially from the Republicans. If you take out the other side of the vote, this is not something we want, nor something we're willing to support. And I do believe that we're willing to stand on this again.
That was the next question, because typically a budget bill gets voted down. By the way, if you still go to the legislature's website, it says if a bill passes JPAC, it usually becomes law. And I love how the House is proving that not to be the case for the first time in many decades. But very often, sure, you'll vote down the first iteration, and then JFAC will come and change a couple of numbers, send it back to you, and the House will vote in favor of it. What are the odds you're going to actually get a budget that says, okay, here's the budget for Commission for Libraries, and oh, by the way, this exemption for libraries that has stood for many years is now gone, basically implementing House Bill 666?
There's kind of a two-part question to that. And I recognize that, although I think that you guys have had a hard change in the last 2 years, a lot of focus probably has been on budgets with my limited knowledge. And ARP has been a game changer. But for me and all my life and things in which I've dealt, I've always said that the overriding factor that has changed American society has been social issues. And so we kind of have a budget issue and a social issue. And I'm willing to right now accept the social issue and change that. But I think there'll be a budget change. But if I have to take one or the other, I'm taking the policy change. Um, if they could knock the budget down half, and that wouldn't satisfy me. Because to
Oh,
me, it's not about the budget.
yeah, no, I agree, but
Yeah,
what I'm saying though is that often, I mean, and you're on the education committee too, so you understand this. On the fight over critical social justice in the college and universities and in the
right,
K-12 system,
right,
the education committee via the chairman in both House and Senate will point and say, "Oh, that's a budget issue. This CRT and all this other stuff, all that stuff is a budget issue. Not that's we're the policy committee." And then the budget people will say, "Oh, well, all that is a policy issue. We're the budget committee." And so it's just a finger pointing exercise. But here you have leverage now.
right,
The one thing that has to happen is the legislature. That's the only thing they have to do. They don't have to worry about anything. They have to pass a budget.
right,
And I imagine the Commission for Libraries will be funded. The question is,
right.
can you get this policy issue addressed via the budget? Because nothing else is going to get done
I know.
unless you use this as a frame to force the Senate to consider 666 or something like it.
Um, no, that I see what you're saying. That part I agree. Um, and I think there's been enough of us on the education committee, at least the last previous years, where I think we've tried to help some of that along. That no, this is our issue. Budget is budget. Policy is policy. But this one, I'm certainly willing to stay here and fight, and I do believe you'll see a few other people change their vote. We're working on that now, and we'll have more people supporting us and saying no. At this point, that I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm not sure that we can. I don't know if we can force the same issue as we did last year with the Senate on House Bill 666. But that's a good bill. To everyone out there, they need to understand that these are our kids. And as I said on the floor, that pornography is not a victimless crime. It creates victims. And then those victims destroy the family destroys the community destroys society, and that's how you destroy a nation. This is absolute degradation. We need to change it. So
So then how much are you gonna go to the mat? Because and the reason I ask this is because I've learned through experience that sometimes a bill will come up and the bill will be presented as doing one thing when really does no. Let me give the example, and you should be ready for it. It's House Bill 377, which has been popularly advertised as banning critical race theory in Idaho, but it didn't do that.
no, no,
So
it
then
didn't.
does the legislature just say, something horrible like, "Well, you can expose kids to, obscene materials as
Mhm.
long as you've notified the parents in advance," or something. I don't know, some
Right,
weird thing that still allows for obscene materials to get in the
right.
hands and condones the state, the government
Yeah.
facilitating that transaction.
I sure don't want it to be that way. I hate that if we have to address this through a budget, directive held within the budget instead of a policy. I guess I don't know yet. I know what I'd like to see. I know the things for which I fought in parental rights, sexuality, opt in. I think I've certainly done my fair share of showing all of us how much sex is actually included throughout the school curriculum, let alone in what's in the libraries. This is a real issue, and I think we have some people who stand strongly. However, we are in an interesting, we are up against the clock, and I think there might be some banking on the fact that
We're just people are anxious to get home. I just don't know, and also, I mean, I'm not a legislator, you are, but I've never in the 28 legislative sessions that I've done had a legislator come home to from Boise and say, "We worked on that bill, but my constituents are angry because we included policy in a budget bill, and they're not having any of that. I mean, how serious is that? That you have folks that are actually willing to allow this thing to perpetuate because of the dynamic between two different committees of the legislature.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. There's a lot of side conversations going on, and obviously the uniqueness of the House is we have a lot more members than our the Senate, and a lot more people that we have to convince to do something, and it does make it more difficult. However, what's also unique is when we get a vote one direction, uh, you went through a lot of work to get that, and I think that speaks volumes, especially when you take the Democrats out on the other side. We had strong Republican support. I
It was a pretty strong vote. Was
I
it the 30,
was it
30,
35 or
30?
36
Had to be more than that.
or was it
30,
38?
35 is, I think it was 38. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was a pretty
Yeah.
solid vote given the way. I mean, you would love to see more. I mean, there were Republicans who voted the other way on it, but given this year and the dynamics, and you're trying to adjourn
Right.
tomorrow, I'll take what I can get out of these guys,
And
I
I
guess.
promise there's a couple that have committed to switching.
Really great.
One, in fairness, Representative Vujnicki
Uh-huh.
started texting us right away saying, I'm sorry, I pushed the wrong number." And then
Oh,
he was trying to switch. They had already gone out of the order. So his, for one, I mean, he was 100% no. So,
okay.
for example,
That's good. That's
yeah,
good to know.
100% no.
So this issue, when we've been talking about um, the sexualization of children, the access that they have to pornographic or obscene materials, the way in which and if you're not sure, check out the critical social justice report on our website. It, details all this stuff, the interaction that Planned Parenthood has with the education system, which is just
Yep.
shocking. But when I talk to people, and legislators claim, some of your colleagues claim, oh, this really isn't going on. It's not really happening. The CRT stuff's not happening. The sexualization stuff has been overblown. What do you say? What are your constituents telling you about that? Are they seeing this stuff?
What's been interesting is, again, as you know, the sexuality has been a big deal to me, and brought it up twice. It's passed the House strongly. I think party line. I think I had to party
I think
line.
there was one that may have gone the other
There
way.
might on the
Yeah,
second
yeah,
time,
yeah.
but it was is a pretty gosh darn strong
Well, I
vote.
mean, the party line meaning the letter
But
next to the name.
true, but still, that's a pretty strong vote for that kind of a bill. And so then, as it had gone to the other side, it's this past year, I had people in my constituents, and they had called me because of what had happened at their high school and what their kids had encountered. And one of the moms told me, "I thought we passed parental opt-in, parental rights opt-in." And I said, "Well, actually, we didn't. It had just passed, in the House, and the parents are becoming more and more aware." You had seen some of the parental groups that had come down here in support of, educational choice. These are some of the same parental groups that have been formed that want change. Period. So,
Explain the opt-in thing for folks who aren't aware of what that
oh, okay,
means.
sure. So currently, right now, what I would like to see is to continue to give more rights to the parents, because ultimately the parent is in control of the child. It is not the state, it is not the school. And so, what we have right now for sexuality content, and let me just say, this last time I brought it last year, I changed and moved away from sex ed. We can have the sex ed, we can teach the sex ed, so long as we stay within the bounds that Idaho statutes define. It's the physiology and anatomy, but anything outside of that, it doesn't matter if we're talking things as far as pronouns, or Johnny, you could be a girl if you want to, or if we're talking reading Judy Blume books and graphic, at least I'll say graphic because it's far more than I had ever read, even in college, graphic sexuality and sex details. Those are the kind of things then that I'm asking before that happens, that a parent has to opt in. As it is right now, you opt out, which means that the control is in the child. So the child then takes home to the parent a note or a form. Maybe they see it, maybe they don't. Then it's the responsibility of the child. Take it all the way back. In other words, the responsibility rests with the child. In an opt in, that's adult to adult. So, and in my legislation talks about 2 weeks beforehand, where the teacher would have 2 weeks to let the parent know that we're going to be discussing da 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 da, and then the parent would have to sign the form to opt in. If the parent isn't signing that form, or if not enough parents have signed the form, then either the teacher needs to contact them, and there are many means by which the teachers contact the parents. They are very much in touch with the parents, and they act like maybe some thought this might be a big deal. It's not. But if the parents aren't all opting in and they're all going to the library, which is part of what they have to provide, maybe the teacher should rethink the subject matter. So this legislation on opt-in does not remove the ability to teach these things or to have some of these books. But what it does say is the parent has to agree to it. And that's a little bit of a shift. So I'm not trying to take things away. Some accuse me of that, say no, but I just want the parent to agree to it.
What would be the harm of just taking it away though?
Oh, easy. I mean, not harm, but the problem is we are being hit on so many different sides. As I have delved into this issue over the last 4 years, and pretty deep. I mean, too deep to probably discuss right now. And there's probably things that you've already addressed at other times with some of the stuff you started to put out. We are getting hit so many ways when the National Education Association holds their national conferences. I read, I get on there, I see the things they're pushing, I listen to the videotapes they put out. They are pushing sex and sexuality in so many different ways. And then between, as I found out my first year here in the summer, that, oh my goodness, there are grants being given. Now, granted, this Biden administration is removing the abstinence program, which really wasn't abstinence. The thing I talked about on reducing the risk, it really wasn't about abstinence. It was just abstinence of either getting diseases or getting pregnant. But so parents would think, oh, we've got an abstinence program where it's abstinence from sexual intercourse. No, it's just we don't want you to get pregnant or get a disease. And so there's a lot
That's
of language change that's
that's a
very
weird.
misleading.
Yeah, that's very misleading.
It's very misleading. And so, but the point is that this particular program was, to me, I called it an end around of education, and it came through the Department of Health and Welfare. And that was, upsetting. And so there was a lot of work on that. And I think some understanding coming through that. But the reason it's hard to get rid of it, and the reason I want to give parents a tool in case it does come, is they're being hit so many different ways. We can't even think of the many different ways.
Well,
So,
but it is true. But some of that is an appropriation too. I mean, some of the money that's being brought into Idaho to administer those programs in the school districts is federal money.
oh, it is. No, you're
So
absolutely right.
you could easily say no, not going to accept that grant, or no, not going to appropriate the money. Why does it
Yep.
happen?
Well, it's probably for the same reason these things happen at the national level. There's so much going on, and that health and welfare budget is so big. And that I'm engaged in educational things, and it's hard enough to try to understand all of the monies just in education, and then you take on, which I tracked down about 3 years ago, this some of the grant money coming in, and how it was. Why would they have a say in education? As a matter of fact, this year I spent time tracking down the surveys, the healthy risk surveys, and the different things that are given to the students that include questions that may or does involve sex and sexuality. Although I think some of that's been toned back, in the Department of Education came in and committed to us, at least this one, that they would no longer do those surveys. So we didn't have to worry about that one, but there's still surveys coming through the Department of Health and Welfare. So there's just so many things that you don't even know it was something of which you had to be aware. So that's
It
why.
truly is. It's stunning, and like I said, my staff is always uncovering new things.
Right.
I have a team of people who've been watching this stuff for many years, and we're always shocked to see the. By the way, there's water there if you're
Oh,
thirsty. As I
thank
know
you.
you walked over
I
here.
did. I
If you
did
change
find
your
this.
mind, there it is.
Appreciate it.
But it seems as if the solution to the problem is not terribly difficult, and you have an 85% Republican legislature. Why is it so hard to fix this stuff? I mean, really, absolutely fix this stuff.
Well, I mean, you have committees. We work within committees, and committees, deal with those groups that have vested interests. I don't even know if stakeholder is the right word anymore because, in conjunction with the stakeholders, our parents, and sometimes we it's just interesting how we get everyone involved in that conversation. So, I certainly know how I feel about it, and I certainly know where I spend my time, whatever extra time there is, and how I try to track that down. And I even have a friend who lives in the Idaho Falls area that again is highly involved in this on a national level, and so it's very helpful to me to help me to track some things down that others may not be able to track down. So, but it's a big department, and you got hearts and minds you've got to change. And so today felt like, I mean, it felt like a victory, felt like a step in the right direction.
Do you
You
think the
know,
tide's turning, or do you still have a lot of work to do?
I think we still have a lot of work to do. But I think I feel like there's been some wins and some successes. Part of everything is education. And I don't mean education as in the committee. I mean, the educating those with whom you may work, as they're trying to do to us. How do you change hearts and minds? I mean, you don't do it like that. You have to be able to have conversation and find the time to have the conversation. This is why going virtual to me would never work. You would never find your colleagues to have conversations with, meaning, like what was discussed last year. We need to be here. We need to be here with each other and have conversations.
Well,
It takes time.
you're already at something of a loss because, and of course, you've only been here since what
2018.
2018, and there was a time when you didn't have all those offices down there in the
We're
garden level.
talking about that.
Did you ever see that? Or okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, people they were on the floor, and the chairmen were in a little tiny suite that's not really a lot bigger than this room. All the chairmen from the House in a room that's not no bigger than the studio was really stunning. And now everyone's spread out. You can't have these conversations, and you can't have a discussion about what's going on in a particular part of the state, and maybe even have different ideas come together about, what they're seeing in Standpoint versus what they're seeing in Soda
Yeah.
Springs. It's
It's an intriguing thought. It's been brought up a few times this year of those who are leaving and some of the experiences they had where it was like that. And I I don't know. I mean, I guess if that's the situation which you have to work, you would work that way today with social media. I dare say I'm not sure I would like it if you're always worrying about conversation. You'd have to have a lot of trust in your colleagues that there weren't gotcha moments,
mm.
that you could have those conversations. But hey, that point, there's some truth to that.
And you would recognize, even in this short-ish time that you've been in the legislature, that the tenor of the debate in the House floor has gotten spicy, shall we say, this particular legislative session. And it's on a lot of these critical
Yeah.
issues. I'd be
Yeah.
remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about men competing in women's sports, since you've been talking about that all over the country, and it's sort of
Yeah.
important. Have we done enough to address that issue? I mean, it seemed as if when you passed that bill and you were the lead champion behind that in, was it 2000?
Yeah. 2020.
2020, maybe we've come at least a little bit. Now we're litigating it, of course, and all that. But what else do you have to do to
Yeah.
prevent the continued promotion of this agenda?
And in many ways, I feel like many things of which we're addressing has to do with this, the redefinition of woman.
Oh, wait, are
The
you a
allow
biologist? Because I hear that you can't talk about gender unless you're a biologist, according to the Supreme Court nominee.
Well, and that question was asked when we were actually in Atlanta, Georgia, watching Leah Thomas swim. I'm going to forget her name, but the gal that flew in for our press conference from England when one of the people there tried to quiz her about was she a biologist, and she said, "I'm not a veterinarian either, but I know what a dog is." I thought it was a great
Yeah.
response. So, unfortunately, we definitely have entered a woke generation, and they are being fed an ideology that does not fit with fact nor history. And what they're failing to realize is what they're buying into means there are no truths. I don't know if you want to call it existentialism. It's your truth is whatever you want it to be, but society will break down. It doesn't work that way. And what's been great about sports is we're able to really talk about an issue and define it that crosses Republican and Democrat boundaries until it's brought as legislation. But we have Democrats that are equally as opposed to having their daughters have to compete against biological males as Republicans are. And that's the beauty of the sports legislation. And that's what's been so great as I've been able to either travel or virtually travel and address this issue. We do have more states that are bringing it. Of course, to this point, South Dakota was the only one that has signed it thus far. But interestingly enough, when Governor Noem vetoed it last year, claiming it was style and form, which it was much more than that. It was the first piece of legislation she waited to sign this year, and I think is fantastic. She shall be and is a great champion, I think, of female sports. But the bottom line is, yes, it's not right that women should have to compete against biological males. And the beauty of Leah Thomas is that Leah has more than demonstrated the hypocrisy of having biological males in women's sports. Here we are celebrating. This is the 50th anniversary on June 23rd, 50th anniversary of Title IX, where we're supposed to be celebrating the accomplishments and the fact that as women, we've moved so far along. And as I asked 2 years ago and I ask now, have we really moved that far? Where when I was in Indiana, one of the trips I took this year, there were only two, but when I was in Indiana at the very beginning of the session, and I had an opportunity to also go over because the NCAA is located in Indianapolis, and I had an opportunity to go over and meet with them and tour the facility. But I wanted to send a message, and that message is this: on the 50th anniversary of Title IX, why is the NCAA's continued conversation on national TV and wherever it may be about non-binary and, to use their word, transgender? We should be celebrating women.
Why is that, do you think? Well, answer that question, then I have a more specific question to that whole issue.
Yeah, it's very disappointing because the NCAA really used to be behind and support and help women. What they are setting up, when we say that it's going to be the end of women's sports, it really is, because if Leah Thomas, Leah competed, let me just remind everybody, for 3 years, Leah competed on the men's team, and then Leah's senior year.
And was a subpar performer as well.
Subpar performer. And the same happened with June Eastwood at the University of Montana, the person whom I addressed in 2020. June competed for the University of Montana as John for 3 years and then decided to compete as June the senior year. Both of them annihilated the women. June did it in the indoor 1600 championship, annihilated our women at Idaho State University, just as Leah Thomas has done in annihilating the women. Now, if either one of these had decided to compete as a freshman, as opposed to their senior year, and I say that because now they'll be gone, but if they had done this as a freshman, I promise you, in the world of NCAA athletics, that every school in the conference, so in the case of Montana, every Big Sky school or every Ivy League school would have been forced to go out and find a biological male for their team so that they could compete against, the other team. Because when the other side, this is one of the things I open with my testimony, that you're going to hear the false narrative that sport is really about community and humanity and inclusion. So no, it's not. No, it's not at all. That may be something that's subpar as we get farther down. It's about competition and it's about winning. If it wasn't about competition, it wasn't about winning, then players wouldn't be cut and coaches wouldn't be fired. So it's a lot more than that, and it's not fair right now. So if we don't change this, there will no longer be women's sports, guaranteed.
So then again, now you've studied this and it moves beyond sporting events. Um, what's really going on here? Why is this? And I see it as sort of this nihilistic thing where, it's like, okay, anything goes. But yet, if I walked into a doctor's office and said, "Hey, doc, I'm a fish, and would you cut my arms off and put gills on me? Just maybe lip little slits in where my rib cage is," they'd, have you committed. But if I walk in and say, "Hey, I think I'm not a dude, and please, can you cut off some parts or give me some hormone treatment?" They'd sign you up and they'd applaud you for that. Why is that happening?
As the adults in the room, somewhere along the line, people, why and where, decided to allow these ideas to flourish, and certainly we've been able to, particularly in sports, see the results of it. At this particular point, I'll probably be careful how far I venture out in saying much, because everything I say can still be used in discovery. So I'm just be careful
You
with some of my thoughts.
you can't have a conversation about the way in which gender is being redefined by the
Yeah,
media
it is being
and
yeah.
Hollywood and all of that.
Yeah, I can have a small one. I'll just be very careful, but it is being, I do oftentimes say that we do see the redefinition of what it means to be female. And we're also seeing the redefinition with all of this of family. And it goes to the very things I really believe that I spoke to on the floor. When you can redefine your family and redefine certainly mom, or what it is to be a woman, who usually is at the center of a family, when, to help that family function. This is how you break society down. And we certainly know that, there's a lot of interesting things being pushed out there, and I don't support it. In my world, I'm very much believe in our constitutional republic. Our founders did not intend for any of this. One of the things I even said on the floor today, that I believe there's a lot of conflation of what the First Amendment really means. The First Amendment is not a free for all. It was never intended for that. As a matter of fact, religion and morality matter in our constitutional republic. And so to think that, we can just say and do and be and show, whatever, that is not how this country was founded. And I do not believe this country will last if we keep embracing all of this.
This kind of ties into a debate that happened yesterday on the floor. And I don't remember what your vote was on it. And unfortunately, is I forgot to look it up before, so you'll remind me. Um, and actually, if I'm also candid, was it yesterday? The vote on childcare, was that yesterday or the day
It
before?
was yesterday.
And the discussion was really interesting, um, because in a way that ties into, okay, and you see legislators struggling with this. Well, employers need workers, and somewhere in that mix is the question of, well, don't kids need their moms and dads? What was your remind us what your vote was on that, your perspective. I just
Yeah,
don't
that
remember.
was from my area. I admit probably bothered me all day yesterday, but because I was torn. I That was one vote I voted for. We had a lot of our moms in Idaho Falls, and I was over this with Wendy and with others going through the bill. We had a lot of home moms that had daycares in their home where they'd watch 5 kids. They were shut down, and that's hurt them. This actually is for that. There's some other things that may benefit, but that's why I also voted against all-day kindergarten. I know it seems maybe a little bit conflated. It was,
Well, I don't know. I kind of,
tough vote.
I kind of get it. The notion of, well, and we've talked about this with the PPP, where businesses were
Right.
hurt, and they, the Constitution, our state Constitution, the federal Constitution talks about, um, regulatory takings. Mentions that explicitly. The government shuts you down or somehow injures your ability to act in the free
Yeah.
economy, then you get a regulatory taking. But this
Right.
was kind of a weird thing too, where you had school districts that were applying for these grants, and
Yeah.
you just now imagine a scenario where the school districts are now going to be the daycare.
You know what? That point is so well taken. That was part of my consternation. If
Yeah.
if I could have direct, you know, sometimes with these votes, there are colliding principles,
Mm,
and you're forced to make a decision sometimes based on conversations. And I have been in for a couple of years actually with conversations with so many of our moms who wanted to stay home with their kids. But the point you're making, I think it was Arnie Duncan, which we should make him make more often, and maybe you guys could look that up. Arnie Duncan, during the Obama reign, was very explicit about the direction that he wanted schools to go. And you can find his video out there. And he was talking about the future of school would be that they'd become the community centers.
right.
And that what would happen is so that all the kids would be fed and everything, they would literally go to school like at 7 in the morning. They would provide them with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They would go to school. Then that community center would provide them with their homework. They'd take them to their activities. And after they ate in the evening, the parents could come pick them up. That's a ward of the state.
Truly.
Yeah. And but
There's
Arnie Duncan, look, you can look it up.
no
That's
other way to frame that. But that's the question is,
yeah,
okay, so you've got, this and the business community, of course, pushes really hard for this because the thing that they want most is, available workers. The
I know.
children kind of get in the way of all that. But that's not the only policy. The state also provides a subsidy to parents who can't afford childcare so they can go get childcare. And all that seems to be pushing the narrative that parents are less important. The government,
Yeah.
parental role shrinks. Government, but you saw that on the full day kindergarten
Yeah.
vote. Was that your reason for voting against it? Was the same argument?
Yeah. I love the creativity and how you reward it. If the money's going to be there, I do. I mean, let's reward excellence. But I I have always spoken against all day kindergarten. I even had my mom, who for years taught kids how to read at school, say, "What are you doing?" I mean,
Really?
meaning everybody like, "What are we thinking about?" And so kids do best when they're with their parents, and I understand. I understand not everybody's the same, but Gary Marshall actually in the past has spoken so eloquently to these kind of issues and talking about, we feel like a majority of our kids are, and these are the kids also that we need to make sure that we don't leave behind in trying to make sure all policies are for everyone else. We have the ability already for kids to go to all day kindergarten if they need to. The We know the number one indicator of success of a child is the involvement of the parent. And one of the conversations or conversation that I've enjoyed the most with Senator Thane through my years here is he has everything he does, and sometimes it's very creative, and I don't say that in a bad way, but he always brings it back to how do we empower the parents? How do we empower the family? And that's the part for me that's probably most important. How do we empower the family and the parents to, if we want our kids to read better, we need to empower the parents to read with them.
It's weird because I just thought of this, but and I think Senator Thane supported the full day kindergarten bill, um, which is a weird direction for him because I remember at least a dozen years ago when Senator Thane said, "Oh, kindergarten's worthless. We should get rid of it." And now here we are making it full day kindergarten. And the other question that I had on that bill was they explicitly like stayed away from the words full day kindergarten. They talked about everything except for that.
Yeah.
But those other exceptions were kind of scary too, because I guess some school districts were going to do summertime class programs, after school programs, before school programs, and the school districts just get to decide what they're going to do. Was that something that you were looking at as well, or was it just the full day kindergarten part that got you?
Um, I think all of it, and certainly when I go back Tidal Falls, I'm going to go spend some time with someone that with whom I've been able to speak that, on how they're approaching all day kindergarten. Not so much that that's going to change my mind, but I want to know what they're doing. I want to better understand what it is we're doing, and kind of along that lines in 2019. 2018, I believe it was, the Hunt Institute had been trying to get people from the education committee to go to one of their national conferences. And I know I'd received some invitations, and I had, I wasn't really interested. And then they'd contacted me directly, and they had something in New Orleans. And I thought, all right, maybe I should see what they're doing. And so I literally went there with the intent to see, what are we teaching? And so I was there with Chairman Clow, and and then I think the rest of our delegation were some of the Democrats and from the Senate, and so we had an Idaho delegation. I know part of my experience from that was used on the floor last year, and it was one of the reasons I had to stand up and clarify. While we were there, one of the things that for me it was very disturbing is they had a panel up front, and everybody's sitting at their table with their states. We've got New York next to us and all. And this panel was discussing the problem that they saw with women. And one of the gals was speaking, saying how frustrating it is that women are being forced to stay in the home and to watch and feel the needs of these children. And they almost said it like that. And I turned, it was a round table, and I turned, so certainly my table, my Idaho table, could hear, but also so other tables could hear. And I go, you mean mothers caring for their children? And they seemed, my interpretation, and I don't think I was wrong, they had used that with such disdain that moms would actually remain home. It was almost, again, like you said, they need people in the workforce. And for a mom maybe to be home one-on-one with a child, what a waste when we can, put them in
That's
a
just
daycare
crazy,
situation.
right?
And so the best case scenario for kids would be to be home with their moms. And I know that's not everybody, truly, everybody out there and everybody that wants to respond, we know that's not the case, and everyone can't do it. But the moms, and one of the reasons for my vote is we have moms who are willing to stay home with their children and watch a couple others, and we're making it hard. No wonder. I recognize that the solution for some of this is, we need big daycares. No, really, we just need more moms who want to stay home in their own home, and don't make it so hard that they can't not watch a few other kids. There's nothing wrong with that, and they will give more love to those kids with just a few than having a big daycare setting where the kids are sent. And so if people want to work and they want to leave their child with the next door neighbor and pay them a little bit of money because they're going to be home anyway, I don't have a problem with that.
But that also ties into the pre-kindergarten too, is the same story, only with a younger age, where
Yeah.
somebody says, "Oh, what a shame that mom can't go to work because, or dad in some instances can't go to work because, the kid's 3 years old, and so that's 2 years they have to wait before they can do anything because kindergarten doesn't start."
This was mentioned up at the Hunt Institute. I mean, making the case that the children start learning at 6 months or beyond. I'm like, are we making the case for,
It
taking,
sounds
yeah,
sounds like they are.
I know.
Congratulations, it's a girl. Now we'll
Exactly.
take that from you because we're going to educate them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can see them on
You can
weekends.
see, people should know that I run a daycare in Idaho Falls, not a daycare, sorry, a preschool. And when I say I run, I have what I call a principal, and I'm just generally, I started it, I oversee it. We only go a total of 5 hours a week. We have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old and a pre-K, kind of thing. We only go 5 hours a week. I've had people, why aren't you going every day? Why aren't you going more? Let's do it on Friday. And I specifically have said, because they're learning just fine. They need to be home with mom.
Right.
That our purpose, and our kids, when they come out of the program, they do very well. And they're fine with just it's as much, the moms who want them to do something, and half the time they just go work out. We have our preschool area, because it's in the club, and it's just great. Kids are in school, but 5 hours a week, and that's plenty. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
But they get to choose to do that
But
twice a week. That's their
but
choice.
you have to think that some of that stuff is affecting young people in ways we don't fully understand. Because, I mean, as time has gone on, I mean, everyone's obsessed with COVID numbers. Oh, 0.01% of
Yeah.
people are dying. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess that's something. Half the marriages in America end in divorce. Where's the outrage over that? and you've got kids that are now have mental health problems, I guess. Maybe there is something about this decimation of the family, this
There is.
destruction of an attack on
Yep.
everything. Has that come up in, say, the education committee, or have you had a discussion about how the policies that you're imposing maybe is impacting the quality of the family life here in Idaho and across America?
I know that that is the kind of discussion that I think that we should have. We certainly, I know these are things I'll bring up a little bit, but it's not the in-depth kind of conversation. I know Gary Marshall, has that others have, but no, we,
Representative Gary Marshall, by the way, for
I
those
am, yes, I am so
that's
sorry. That
okay. That's
was,
all right.
oh goodness, I think
Mhm.
I've called him that a few, Representative Gary
Yeah, yeah.
Marshall have, he's someone that has truly been a champion of helping to get rid of Common Core and a lot. Anyway, I definitely enjoy working with that man, but we need to have some of these in-depth discussions. Representing Mendive and I oftentimes talk about this, and so it's we're making a list of things that we'd like to address. Probably should have done it prior, sure, but for next session,
Next session, yeah.
and yeah, it's a little bit different than some of the things maybe that we've done. We need to hear legislation, need to have those hearings, but some of our discussions, should center around things that our constituents are concerned about, and we know. I mean, we're getting elected.
Yeah, and your role in contributing to either the positive or the negative outcomes. I mean, because you can create a program all day long. Hey, I've created this program, problem solved. I've never seen that actually come to fruition. It sounds good and everything. Look at me. I have done this great thing. Here's a grant program. And somebody is getting impacted by that. They're not always positive outcomes. There's always
Right,
something
right,
on the other side of that trade, I guess.
right.
So kind of moving on to also in the education vein, and being on the education committee, what the heck is going on that a Republican controlled legislature can't pass education choice? Because a lot of the
Yeah,
things that we've talked about would be resolved simply by this education savings account program, or
sure.
tuition tax credit,
Right.
whatever it may be. You can't get anything. And I've watched this for 2 decades now, and nothing gets done. What's happening there?
Certainly, this was a good year to really move that conversation. COVID has done a lot to help us. I believe that it's something that needs to happen. Maybe on some of our part on the committee, maybe we have failed to properly engage some of those, again, known as stakeholders. There seems to be a big fear. Yeah, I think some of you guys heard the numbers that were presented. We're looking at like 1 to 3%. This is not going to hurt
1 to
what they
3% participation,
yes,
who might choose not to go
participation.
to the public schools and use that
Right.
money to go
Mhm.
somewhere else.
Exactly. And yet the public schools are still going to get some money for that person. It's not, depending on where they live, right? So it's not, we are not going to hurt public schools. Right now, we're growing and people are coming in. It's actually a great solution to some of the schools that are overcrowded.
R Ry
Offer choice.
Ryan Kirby's comments, he sat in that same chair, Representative Kirby, and he said, "Well, we gotta move into this slowly. Maybe if the bill had been slower in its implementation, it would be better, but, because we don't really know how it's gonna work." But my response to that was, "Well, they're using it in other states. They seem to be doing just fine. It's not like you're inventing the wheel."
Right. I my thought is, and I'm happy, I'm working on having better relationships, but we need, it's going to come back, and we need to keep pushing for it. We have too many people, even in Idaho Falls, that are pushing for this. They want choice,
They want it
and
now.
so if I need to engage and help more with stakeholders, help them understand, getting some of these experts back on just a Zoom, in private conversations with some of them, then we need to do that, because this does not have to be the threat that I think some in our current public education think that it is. And I think that's part of the problem. I don't want, you know what? I want to be able to move this forward without making it a battle with them. It doesn't have to be.
But they battle in every
I
state, though.
know.
I think that's
I know,
what are the
but
odds it's going to happen?
meaning from me, I'm not trying to do this with them. I just want the choice for parents. Another interesting conversation that might have really helped is I had legislation that I was bringing to strengthen and clarify some of the homeschooling participation in extracurricular activities, and we never quite got there, which was unfortunate. The reason that that was important, because this kind of falls into that idea of choice. During the COVID and the COVID shutdown, I can tell you wholeheartedly, I had a lot of parents, not just a few parents, but a lot of parents who wanted to pull their kids from school and homeschool them. The reason they didn't is because their child participated in sports. And when you're looking at sports, some of the understanding with homeschoolers is that as long as they're not taking someone's spot. So, in other words, some people are, oh, we're fine. Well, no, that's because they're just running cross country. Everybody gets to run cross country. But when you get into football, volleyball, and basketball, there are cuts taking place. And so there's some ambiguity as to whether or not if you had 20 people trying out and I'm the best player on the team, but I decided my mom's going to pull me to homeschool me so that I don't have to go through the anxiety and stress. And I'm now going to depression because you might send me home. And I'll just be but I can still be on the team. Anyway, just continued choice that parents wanted. And I believe with all my heart, more parents would have homeschooled if there had been more choice to allow them to continue in whatever extracurricular activity. It could be band, basketball, whatever. So we need choice.
It's weird, and I really want to ask you this question, but I haven't really thought about it ahead of time. So
Okay.
hopefully this will come out correctly. In certain sectors over the last, I don't know, 20 years that I can think of, that I've had conversations with people about this subject, some people will kind of quietly whisper to me, well, Wayne, um, really, public schools shouldn't have all these sports programs. That really the private sector could offer those things just as effectively. You could have, as my son was in t-ball and my daughter was in dance and stuff like that, and I know there are kids that do flag football and tackle football and basketball and stuff. I know this is more hypothetical, but
Yeah.
from the standpoint of hypothetically, is that true? I mean, from your standpoint, do you think that that's something that maybe you'd get a better outcome? You would resolve the problem of, oh, I have to stay in the public school because of the sports program, or does it make sense?
Well, I think that was unique to COVID and the mandates that were inappropriately applied. I will never speak. As a matter of fact, you can look at some of my videos on my website. I will never speak against the extracurricular activities. The reason being that I know, because that's who I primarily work with, our youth. I know that whether it's band or basketball or whatever, that these extracurricular activities are what bring value and joy and meaning to the lives of our kids. You see, we have to understand that we have different value sets. And part of helping a child, another reason why you don't give a 14-year-old the choice to go get vaccinated by themselves without parental consent, the values of a child are different than the values of an adult. What drives a child, teenager, high schooler, oftentimes, and even into the college years, is the idea of, I want to have fun. Okay. If we as adults center that which we do around, hey, I want to have fun, I think life falls apart. And so we have to help them as they're going through, because these things are important to them. And it is through some of these activities that they truly start to learn, okay, maybe everything isn't fun. When I'm goofing around and on the basketball team and I'm missing shots and they put us on the line and we're going to do a 15, a cowboy, we're
I have
running.
no
That's
idea
not fun.
what does all that
Okay,
mean.
well that means that we're holding them accountable, and now they have to do line drills,
Okay,
and they have to do a lot of them back and forth
okay,
15 times,
okay,
and
okay.
and that's not fun. But there's value in that, and we have to help them shift their paradigm. And I can't think of anything better than sports and these extracurricular activities to help our kids continue on their continuum of learning. I think every child should be involved in something.
Sure, but
So
they
I wouldn't.
I'm just
Yeah, I
more
know.
philosophical, but not that.
Yeah.
But you could still have those in the community. And I guess one of the other reasons that I asked the question is just because I've seen how the school districts use that as a hammer on parents. We've got a levy coming up, and gosh, I know you love
Has
this. I know how much you love this basketball program. Would be ashamed if something terrible happened to it, right? Or when my son was in band and at Nampa, Columbia High School in Nampa, he had a couple of different band classes every semester,
yeah.
and the threat was always, well, it's a shame that the marching band uniforms are 20 years old or whatever. Kids that now have their own kids
Right.
are wearing the band uniforms from way back when, I guess, or whatever. I mean, but isn't that the other part of it is sort of like, okay, this is a way to coalesce community support
It,
for
it, it certainly can be, and I'd simply tell them they're not going to do away with sports. I mean, shame on those who would use false narratives to secure that which they want. Fact of the matter is, to me right now, this would be a no starter. I think it was during the shutdown, they did away with the sports and some of the extracurricular activities at junior high level. And I did go to bat with our parents and all to make sure we kept them at the high school level, And so the junior highs, you take the football programs and all, they are run outside of, as you're suggesting, they are run outside of the school, but the kids still play for their school
right.
and then until you hit your freshman year.
There's this
Um,
high school athletics association, I guess, that runs all those
Idaho High School Activities Association.
yeah. So are they cognizant of some of the friction that's going on with I guess the post-COVID era when it comes to
Oh,
sporting events and
Wayne, they are very cognizant. Last year, if you recall, Representative Brent Crane and I brought HCR2, which at the very beginning of the session, I mean, right almost on day one, and it was to open everything up, and which would have included our schools and the gyms so that the parents and the grandparents could go watch their kids. And as we were pushing that forward and as things settled down a little bit, that's where the governor himself then had opened things up.
right,
So the Idaho High School Activities Association is very much aware. We also had gone kind of toe to toe with them when during the tournament time they decided to go back and close things down. Even the governor to open things up, and then they wanted to close things down to 20%. Remember that with the exception of the executive director, they are comprised of a lot of superintendents and administrators, coaches, so that's another discussion that we'll save for another day.
fair enough. A couple more things before we wrap up, as I know it's been a long day for you, but I know the answer to this, but I think it's important that viewers know the answer. You're on record as having supported the college and university budget that passed a couple of days ago or so. I don't remember. I'm losing track of days, but that wasn't you voting. So why don't you explain what happened there?
Yeah, that was quick as I was getting ready to leave, and you're trying to look at what's coming up and guess what's coming up, and having conversation with somebody who is carrying it, and a conversation that was explained to me is to what had happened during JFAC and the concern that if it anyway got voted down, that it'd come back higher. So it literally was that's how it's presented and what I was worried about.
You were worried about it coming back higher.
100%.
Oh, well, but still, that what it means is that you still have the social justice stuff that's fully funded, the critical
Yeah.
race theory, the stuff that's on the
That was
campuses.
definitely a vote that I wish had taken place where I was here, because the other thing that I planned to do had I been here, you can't really hand this off, and a conversation that briefly had with the new State Board of Education president, Kurt Liebig, but and it really wasn't fair, but I plan to pursue this. I don't know if you followed what South Dakota has done.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's absolutely no reason that Idaho can't look to do the same thing. Governor Kristi Noem, with her regents, and I promise you, because I'd been there with the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, the regents had pushed so hard against that, and so I know that they're not. It was probably a bit of a battle, but they got rid of all their diversity, equity, inclusion, gone, and instead replaced with a program called Opportunity for All. And some may say, oh, sure, you just got rid of it in Word, but it's still there. I can't speak to that yet. I'll be following up on that. That wasn't the intent, But one thing, and I've had conversation with members of the State Board of Education in regards to this, that, well, we're going to redefine, and I think you guys were aware of it because I had signed up to testify during the summer every time they were bringing this issue up. We're going to redefine equity, for example. You can't redefine equity. It's a national conversation. It is already out there. So the best thing we can do is just get rid of it. And so I like what South Dakota has done.
But we could have done that. We could be doing that here. And by the way, not just South Dakota, but also Florida. I think
Did they do the same
Florida
thing?
State Board of Education. They said no, we're not doing any of this diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. They didn't go as
Great.
far as to rebrand or redefine the debate. I don't think, but they've made inroads to saying we're not going to play this game. And it's
Yeah.
not like we support. You know, I don't care what color you are or what your sexual organs are or any of that
Mhm.
other stuff. We just care that you're here and you're getting an education. We're not obsessing over this.
Right.
But the college and university budget basically signaled to the led to the I would think, I don't this is my words and you can contradict me, that you guys said cut $2.5 million from social justice. They didn't do anything. Nothing has changed. It's all the same. You've given them a 7.5% increase.
One of the things I said last year too, this is why I wanted legislation. I said it last year and I believe I'm still right. You could have cut $10 million. You could have cut whatever out. The ARPA money was a game changer. We needed new policy. I'm happy to cut the money too, but we needed policy. I had legislation wanted to bring, again, didn't get it here. Things going to continue to work on. The vote itself, hey, I can own that. My bad, this year. But I think it's been pretty clear generally where I've tried to be. I'm not in favor of it. I don't want the diversity, equity, inclusion. It is a conversation that segregates and separates. You cannot unite when you're dividing us, and that's what this
Well, and of
diversity,
course,
equity,
and that's the
inclusion is
reason I asked
doing.
it because
Yeah,
you were one of the
I
early
was,
people
yes,
who said, and I remember because you were, I think it was 2019. Yeah, was it 2019? Yeah, it was 2019 where you sent the
yes,
letter to
2019.
Marlene Trump and you kind of started the discussion, the more public discussion. You were at the panel at Boise State that fall talking about this issue, passed legislation in 2020 that said get your ducks back in order, get back to your core mission, reduce the administrative bloat. They didn't do anything. 2021, you say, okay, here's the exact directive, cut $2.5 million from
Yeah,
these programs. They didn't do anything. So to be clear, and the reason I asked, it wasn't
yeah,
necessarily you that was casting a vote. You had a substitute. That substitute was filling in for you,
right. But it was
and
my
at
vote.
your at your
Yeah,
behest.
yeah, it was. That's what I said. Can own that. It didn't. I didn't. I wasn't fully informed on my own as I should have been. I know what I planned to do had I been there to speak to this issue on the floor. I also know that one of my frustrations in the education committees, we primarily deal with K through 12. We need to spend more time, which is more where my experience is too, having spent 15 years at the university, including teaching. We need to spend more time, not just have them come and report. And I don't mean that, and that's our fault. They're just doing what they've been asked. But we need to spend more time in that.
That was my surprise too when I had both Senator Thane, the chairman of the Senate Education Committee, and Senator Cloud, the chairman of the House Education Committee here, and both of them said the same thing. They said, "Well, we really don't do a lot with higher ed. We're focused mainly on that. My interest areas in K-12." They said both of them, and so no one's really minding that story. The
Yeah,
question that I wonder is, both those. Well, Marlene Trump dodged the question, or what have you changed? What have you done? And her answer was, "Well, we've evolved." And then, of course, U of I created a whole report claiming that they don't do anything bad. Although, if you read the report, they basically try to explain the way the things they're doing. Do you buy that the stuff has stopped or that anything has changed?
um, for me, the easiest part to focus on first, I'm kind of a Stephen Covey fan. First things first. The most glaring part is diversity, equity, inclusion. We know it's there. They say it's there. As a matter of fact, they've gone to the point where now, when a new staff member or professor or whatever it may be has to now answer how they're going to basically, add or bring benefit to this diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think these things are absolutely categorically wrong. So let's start there. That'll be a big lift. But given, as you mentioned, maybe Florida, but certainly South Dakota, let's look to those who've made changes and let's make changes. I plan to be back next year, and this needs to be an area of focus, turning some more time to higher ed. It's unfortunate that we're losing Representing Marshall. Maybe there'll be someone else on there who has some experience and desire, but that is something that's going to push for. So there may be, certainly are other areas, but we know everybody has diversity, equity, inclusion. Let's start there. Everybody's got it. Everyone's talking about it. They're having to fill things out on it. Let's get that changed.
One more thing, I suppose, we even get to the fact that you're the chairman of a committee, and what are you doing? What's bubbled to the surface? I really haven't seen a lot happen on it's the energy, environment, technology. I get that.
Yeah,
I haven't even been in that committee
no.
ever. I've never been in that committee. What are you guys doing?
The committee is probably only of interest to a few people. It's of interest to me because while sitting on the Idaho Falls City Council, we were absolutely involved with UAMPS and NuScale in helping to make sure that the small modular reactor program came to the INL. So we're involved with that. And then, of course, in Idaho Falls, as you know, we have the Snake River and we have 3 hydro dams. And hydro has always been a passion of mine because it's clean, reliable, and renewable. But FERC and NERC won't address that. As a matter of fact, I think if you look farther east, I mean, the environmentalists and everyone, I mean, certainly here, but where that directive is coming from, they'd like to get rid of our dams. Obviously, that will be a huge disservice to Idaho. And of course, it's going to be a big issue on the ballot coming up in May with something I know Brian Smith absolutely supports, keeping our dams and maintaining our water and our hydro and our ability to transport and our way of life. So these are things
you're referring to the 2nd congressional district race in which the incumbent has proposed removing the dams.
100%, that's what I'm referring to. And that I knew this was coming in 2019. I did a resolution, a rather in-depth resolution, helping to clarify. We had, I think, 11 entities involved with this from, Idaho Falls Power, Idaho Power, anyway. And on that, we went through, and again, to make sure that we could say that in Idaho, our legislative body values hydro and views it as reliable, renewable, and clean. And and then last year, Representative Choi also did a resolution when it was mentioned that we might be breaching the dams. We can't do this right now. It's crazy. So these are issues that would come before our committee. There's a lot of side conversations and people with whom I've met, including environmentalists and some of these other groups, trying to determine what it is that, we will bring forward. It's been such an incredibly busy session because it feels, condensed, that there were a couple of issues that I wanted to bring again that I didn't last year. We kind of did more of an in-depth view into a little bit of the technology with the cyber. And recognizing who all is dealing with that, because to me it's a little, all of our universities are involved in the cybersecurity at INL. And you just want to know, when you have a lot of foreign students coming, how are they really dealing with that? When a student comes from China, what does that really mean? And so these are some of the things we dealt with, but we didn't do as much this year. Last year, I invited Greater Idaho to come and report, which is the movement to bring Oregon, into Idaho with all of their resources, with Coos Bay, the deep water port, where we could actually end up with the direct transport all the way to the Pacific Ocean, with all of their minerals and resources. I think it's a conversation worth having, and certainly one that.
You still have Lewiston, so you do have a port to the Pacific.
Yeah, right. But this would be even deeper, and with some of the deregulations that could come from bringing that part into our state. There could be a lot of benefits. Right now, there's an in-depth economic study taking place with a firm up there in Moscow, Idaho, and so we'll see. Anyway, that was a group that I invited, and we did a joint House Senate hearing on that. But this year we probably haven't. We dealt some with thermal energy, but we haven't had any big issues this year. We just
Since your technology, and I know there was a bill this legislative session dealing with digital assets, cryptocurrencies that went through the business committee, but is that something that your committee is or will take a look at?
We were told that we could get some interesting legislation this year that was kind of making its way through things nationally. Like into that, it didn't come. So, but yes, I mean, in theory, with a change here or there, yes, we could get that. It was a couple years ago when it was a couple years ago where we had the facial recognition stuff that came through our
Yes.
committee and we shot that down.
Yep.
That's pretty scary stuff.
There's a lot of stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, we even talked about ESG, but ESG
Oh,
ties
that's right.
into digital assets
Yep.
also. Well, not decentralized like Bitcoin, but state-run centralized digital currencies that are controlled by a government like China is doing, and
Right.
like there's some talk even in the U.S. of doing.
100%.
License plate readers,
Yep.
drones, AI, whole bunch of stuff
All of
that
that. Well, it just even when I was on the city council in Idaho Falls, I started becoming more and more disturbed when I would just drive up to a stoplight up above and I'd, what is that? Oh, there's a camera up there.
Yeah.
Oh, we need it because of vandalism. No, we don't.
How long is that data stored? Who uses
Right.
it? Who has access to it?
Yeah.
My understanding, license plate readers are still a thing, so they can
Yes.
tell you I think ISP has a database, so if you drive down the freeway, they can tell you that you were at this point at one time and this point at another time.
And triangulate,
Mhm.
what happened.
We
Where,
just
yeah.
don't know. Somebody might have been robbed, and we've got this data of all these people who passed by there, and now they're all suspects in
Right.
their case. It's interesting.
Very true. And maybe this is something then that we would need to pursue in the future because we would have that. I think that would fall under the purview of our committee, certainly could. So, yeah, but no, we didn't have anything major this year. We probably did more major things, last year.
Okay, anything else you wanna talk about? That's a lot.
We did hit a few things. Yeah, would probably on another day spend a little more time on the ESG. That ended up as that the opportunity to bring Glenn back in was quite unique.
Did you
And
get the outcome you think we need to have, or is that
no,
gonna continue to be?
no, I am. We did not get the outcome that I think we needed to have. And we had two pieces of legislation. 737 didn't go forward, and then the resolution was not one of the bills that we had. The second bill, which I think a couple other people had gotten printed, which we already had printed, needs to come afterwards. These to talk in terms of ESG, and that's going to be one of the things we're working on this summer to do more education. That was one of the things the resolution did. The resolution had a lot of graphic language that was educational language, and then at the end gave very strict directive on what the legislature wanted the Federalism Committee to do, and then to come back with legislation at the beginning of the session. And so we obviously passed that in the House, and it's something that disappointed that the Senate did not take up.
Did they understand the danger there, or are they aware of it, but it's
Um,
too
yeah.
hot, I guess? Too third raily? I don't
Well,
know.
I would like to think the part of the purpose in Glenn coming in, it's he listen, this is a number one best-selling author. He's dealing with that with his book right now. This man, has started his own, Blaze Media when he left television. He has Mercury One. He's humanitarian, rescued thousands, of Christians. Anyway, this man knows what he's doing, and so to think when he came in to address leadership, and then everyone who wanted to hear him, the room was full. I think we had 40 legislators at the end before he had to leave. I that was time that he took to come down. We didn't pay for him to come here. He came, certainly after conversation at our invite, and then myself, Representative DeMordaunt, and Senator Vick, went ahead and made all the arrangements and the plans, and to be able to meet with the governor and with the speaker and pro tem, and then the leadership of the House and Senate, and then our colleagues. That was an important meeting. People, their conversations have been shared. Now, granted, that's just a conversation. I understand that maybe more was needed, but I think that the people who heard from him understood that time is short. And so it's going to be incumbent on us over the course before the session starts again to have conversations and look to. I am planning to bring this back, and essentially all it's doing is preserving Idaho so that we're not taking money and that's out there and people turning around and investing it and using it through the ESG scores and all to hurt our values and to hurt our companies, and especially our little businesses. What a lot of people don't know is our small businesses in particular know about this. Long before Glenn says anything, they were on board. And as soon as this came out, I was getting emails, not because of something they heard from Glenn, but what they already knew. And with even the chamber saying, we need to stop this. We're so glad you're dealing with it.
Interestingly, you were at the Associated Taxpayers of Idaho meeting in December, I think. And were you not there?
Not sure if I was.
thought you were there. I don't know. It seems like
I
a
know,
lifetime
time-
ago. But during that meeting, somebody sent me a text with, because the CEO of Idaho Power was speaking, and I got a text message with a screenshot from Idaho Power's website where it had essentially their ESG
Yeah.
score, and it's here.
Right.
It's here, and
It's true.
another, China is already working with these social grades, and the worry, of course, is with their centralized digital banking currency.
Right.
You could have 1,000 yuan in your checking account or whatever, and
Right.
and then if your social score is down, the government could decide that you only have $500 in your checking account, or
Yep.
they could freeze the assets and you can't spend it on certain things, or they can dictate that you can't buy things generally that you want to buy. You could. We were at Moon's today having lunch, and I said this. Fred Birnbaum, has a low ESG score, and he walks into Moon's, and they say, "Sorry, you can't buy this burger today because your score is bad." That is a real thing. That's not some dystopian novel. That is a real thing.
I think it wasn't a dystopian novel, but it's now a current
now it is
thing.
current thing, and all this stuff is, 1984 has played out, and now these other things are playing out.
And we
very,
saw
very
what
well
happened
recently.
in Canada. I mean,
Yeah.
they were shut down with their banks.
They were. You could I had to explain this to folks. You can transact Bitcoin freely. They can't stop Bitcoin, but they can stop you from cashing out your Bitcoin by going to a centralized entity like a Coinbase or a Kraken or something like that, and converting to USD and sending that money to your bank. That's where they shut you down.
Gotcha.
So it's a really interesting thing that people need to be aware of, that it's coming if you don't find a way to stop it. So
100%. And the thought, even with Bitcoin, I know that they say there's no way to trace anything. There's maybe no way to trace anything yet, but the real way where you can't trace anything is when I use cold hard cash.
that's exactly right.
And if you come over and you do a job for me in my backyard and I give you $100, that's a transaction between the two of us.
Bitcoin is pseudo anonymous. That you can find out where the money came and went. You may not know who's connected to the wallet address, but that's why money launderers and malware people would rather use cash, because Bitcoin, you can find those people.
Right.
Cash you can't find. So there's advantages and disadvantages, but I at least can't stop you from spending money on something because there's no third party intermediary. So that's
Right.
kind of cool.
Right.
But that's a lot of stuff you guys are going to have to talk about.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're reading some futuristic novel and then figuring out how to apply policy to it today. It's just weird.
It's true, and I'll just say this, as I know you're ending, that the only way we really do go forward, because as you can see, there's so much and so many things coming, and say it to you, say it to your readers. We only go forward with the Lord's help, and I firmly
True
believe that
story.
that
True
that
story.
without His help, this doesn't happen.
We are a blessed nation for a reason.
Yes,
We just have to continue to remember that we
yes,
can be deserving of those blessings.
yes.
So
Yep.
thank you for being on the program. This was fun. I hope you
Well, thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
I did.
And appreciate you all watching. And yet again, I forgot to ask Allie before we started who was going to be on next week. You don't have anybody? Okay, so maybe if you're watching and you want to be on, go hook up with me and we'll have you on. But Steph Lucas will be on tomorrow to recap the legislative session that we just the week that we just had, maybe the session we just had. If we're all lucky, please pray hard for the legislature to adjourn tomorrow, mercifully.
Unless we have a bill we're still holding. No, I'm
Well,
kidding.
maybe there's well, yeah.
I'm
If it's for
kidding.
good, then that's
Okay.
great. But my experience has been nothing comes, that when you stay
Hey.
a little bit longer, it just bad things happen, for whatever that's worth.
All right. Then we'll look to go home.
Look to go home, and happy spring. It's beautiful outside, so enjoy the fresh air, and we'll talk to you again next time.